So our next speaker is Dr. Mayur, and he's a consultant eye surgeon from Bombay Hospital and Medical Research Center, and he's a consultant eye surgeon on ocular inflammation. And he is going to be talking on a clinical spectrum of Fuchs uveitis syndrome.
So thank you to ARC. Thank you, Chitra Madam, for having me here. I start all my talks with acknowledgements to my teachers in ophthalmology and in counseling psychology. The talk for today is the clinical spectrum of Fuchs uveitis syndrome, perhaps the only anterior uveitis talk today. We start off with a little case presentation. This patient presented to us first in June 2017, a 32-year-old gentleman who had a history of decrease of vision in the left eye with very occasional mild redness for 3 years, that is since 2014. The best corrected visual acuity in the right eye was 20 by 20 N6. In the left eye, it was 20 by 60 N10, and he had normal color vision in both eyes. He had no known systemic illnesses, was allergic to fluoroquinolones. He had a few past investigations. The ESR was documented at 20 millimeter. His RA factor, HLA-B27, ANC-CP were done, they were negative. And his blood was tested for IgG, CMV, and rubella, which were both negative. He was on treatment when he presented to us 5 milligram of prednisolone, which had been tapered from 40 milligram, and he was on oral mycophenolate 500 milligram twice a day. He had been recently started on tablet acyclovir 400 milligram twice a day and was on prednisolone eye drops thrice a day. The patient reported no improvement in his vision despite treatment with all these agents over the past 3 years. Now, on examination, the right eye anterior segment was unremarkable. The left eye showed a iris hypochromia when it was compared to the right eye with a posterior subcapsular cataract, and there were no KPs. It was a relatively quiet eye. The fundus examination was unremarkable in the right eye. The left eye showed 2+ coarse vitreous cells, a trace vitritis, inferior few vitreous exudates, and a mild disc hyperemia, which I felt when compared to the other eye. That is the right eye. I've put it as left eye here, sorry. My working diagnosis was left eye intermediate uveitis. We did ask for a few investigations. The Mantoux was 10 millimeter with 10 TU at 72 hours. The total leukocyte count was normal. His ESR was 1 and serum ACs was 19 international units per liter. Our plan, because of the iris hypochromia, the quiet eye, and no response to treatment, and because of the fact that he was just complaining of decrease of vision and no real episodes of redness, pain, or anything else, was to taper all treatment and stop for the treatment and watch for an increase in vitreous inflammation versus the appearance of any keretic precipitates, basically stellate KPs. We stopped mycophenolate on the 28th of June. Oral prednisolone was stopped on the 2nd of July. Prednisolone eye drops was stopped on the 5th of July. And by the 21st of August, we saw the appearance of stellate KPs. His vision was maintained at 20 by 30 N6. Acyclovir orally was stopped on 31st of August 2017. He's been there. He's been on follow-up since then. His last follow-up was a few days back, December 2021, where he maintains a vision of 20 by 30 N6. And on examination, anterior segment of the right eye remains unremarkable. The left eye has stellate KPs over the entire endothelium. There is iris hypochromia and a posterior subcapsular cataract. Controlled eye pressures. Fundus examination still reveals the coarse 2+ coarse vitreous cells and the trace vitritis. Our diagnosis since then has been a stable Fuchs uveitis syndrome. Before I move further, I just want to put in 3 differentials for KPs when they are not limited to the RS triangle. One should think of Fuchs heterochromic iridocyclitis, the topic in question, Posner-Scholzmann syndrome, and viral anterior uveitis. And these 3 can be differentiated by an occasional raised intraocular pressure, if at all present, in Fuchs, stellate keretic precipitates, and the iris hypochromia, and the posterior subcapsular cataract. Posner-Scholzmann syndrome will be characterized by raised intraocular pressure, spikes which respond to anti-IOP medications, very occasional keretic precipitates, and healthy optic nerves with no visual field effects. The viral anterior uveitis again will have a raised intraocular pressure at presentation. The keretic precipitates will be large and may be associated with stromal edema and will have a reduced corneal sensations. Coming back to the topic in question, that is Fuchs uveitis syndrome. It is a chronic non-granulomatous, granulomatous, cannot decide, granulomatous, stellate KPs, idiopathic, unilateral or bilateral anterior uveitis characterized by iris heterochromia. The uveitis is typically noted in light-colored eye of a young adult with minimal ocular symptoms and a non-related systemic disease. This is the first description that has been given for this disease. The major criteria for diagnosis include diffuse KPs, stellate or non-stellate, mild anterior chamber reaction, defined up to as 2+ cells and flare, absence of posterior synechiae, absence of ciliary congestion or red eye, and the minor criteria for diagnosis include heterochromia of the iris with or without iris depigmentary changes, presence of multiple nodules on the iris, presence of vitreous opacities, unilateral or occasionally a bilateral involvement. The problem with Fuchs is that there is often a chance of misdiagnosis in a busy clinic. The pathognomic clinical features are often overlooked in a busy outpatient setting, even in the presence of classical findings, as the presence of one of the findings, such as large KPs or vitreous opacities, may mislead the clinician to diagnose this as idiopathic anterior uveitis or granulomatous intermediate uveitis. This, when happens, may lead to unnecessary investigations and different diagnoses. The incidence of misdiagnosis in Fuchs has been reported to be as high as 92%. So what are the pathognomic signs? This is a study from LV Prasad Eye Institute where they found that out of the 25 cases of Fuchs, all of them had keretic precipitates, all of them had a posterior subcapsular cataract, whereas none of them had posterior synechiae. That's important. So they have suggested that a constellation of clinical signs of a young patient with anterior uveitis, without a red eye, with keretic precipitates and no posterior synechiae should be pathognomic for the diagnosis of Fuchs uveitis. But most importantly, Fuchs uveitis syndrome is a clinical and not a laboratory diagnosis. Patients would often have decrease of vision, and that is attributed to the cataract, and it has now been established beyond doubt that the results of cataract surgery are good in Fuchs uveitis syndrome. There is an excellent prognosis. Before I conclude, coming to associations of Fuchs, this is a study that comes from Dr. Kalpana Babu's group, where they studied 58 consecutive cases of Fuchs uveitis syndrome and found a systemic association in only 3 cases, where in only 5 cases, systemic sarcoidosis was seen in 2 cases. Serological tests failed to confirm an association with toxoplasmosis in all the cases. Aqueous fluid analysis showed positivity in 3 cases only, 1 each to HSV, CMV, and the chikungunya virus. In the LV Prasad study, the polymerase chain reaction of analysis of the aqueous humor for HSV, VZV, CMV, adenovirus, and toxoplasma did not yield any associations. So finally, before I conclude, coming to the take-home message, the same slide, I've put it back again. The constellation of clinical signs of a young patient with anterior uveitis, without a red eye, with keretic precipitates, and no posterior synechiae should be pathognomic for the diagnosis of Fuchs uveitis. And the diagnosis of Fuchs uveitis syndrome is clinical and not a laboratory diagnosis. Thank you.
Thank you. That was again another very wonderful talk. Discussions. We have Dr. Avinash here, Dr. Vishwas, Dr. Ratnam.
Fuchs, in the Indian scenarios, we don't see is a hypopigmented iris. Another important thing is that intraocular pressure in the Fuchs is never in the range of 40s. If we see that high IOP, pigmented KPs, you should think about viral anterior uveitis, which can also have diffuse KPs. And these diffuse KPs, of course, is not stellate type. So Fuchs uveitis, if you see that one, and it should also be distinguished from intermediate uveitis. So sometimes that some fine KPs can be seen, and then there is a lot of vitreous cells. So there are few vitreous cells seen in the Fuchs, but if you see the large number of vitreous cells, so you should go for good indirect ophthalmoscopy and scleral depression to see that whether there is any exudates in the pars plana region. If it is not there, you can put on Fuchs diagnosis.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Biswa sir.
Dr. Avinash,
I
final
have a question to Dr. Ratnam. So in your 30 years or more practice, so you see ultimately there's not much of change in terms of constellation of clinical features of Fuchs is concerned, right?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Yes.
So,
yes.
but you have seen, you must have heard and seen a lot of people talking, a lot of variations in Fuchs. What are the ones which really comes to your mind when you see this transition or different narration being spoken about Fuchs in your 4 decades of practice?
Okay. Originally, when I started the practice, it was idiopathic. But now more and more people are extracting either Epstein-Barr virus, dengue virus, toxoplasmosis, many other things. So I came to conclusion that there could be some infectious agent that is causing such common clinical presentation. And also, see the viral uveitis is also having central KPs and high pressure. Fuchs is also having diffuse KPs and high pressure. So there could be a possibility of infectious cause for Fuchs. That is the lesson I learned over a period of time.
So it looks like more of a morphological manifestation.
Yes, yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
Dr. JB, your experience?
My experience is that we are seeing in the as before we are seeing Fuchs like that. There is no increase in that one, and recent studies have shown that in Europe the Fuchs has in USA has dropped down because the rubella vaccination. Rubella has been found to be more associated with the Fuchs.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah.
Rohan?
To add to what Dr. Avinash is saying, I think it's one of the benign kind of uveitis, and though, like he said, there are many talks of people using ganciclovir topically or valganciclovir orally for that, but I feel that probably it's not required, and like he has presented very nicely, probably it is more important to taper all the treatment, and even if a small amount of cells persist, let them persist, because your therapy might be more harmful than the actual disease per se.
Yes, yes. There is no need for treatment. Just look for glaucoma, and if glaucoma comes, we will treat. If cataract comes, we will treat. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall I conclude? Yes, Srinivas.
I
Srinivas?
just want to ask the panelists, see, in the Fuchs, we usually have this thinning of the choroid, especially the subfoveal choroidal thinning. But as we see the other forms of the choroidal disease like VKH and all, where it is used as a biomarker, where we see the thickening of the choroid, and based on the treatment, they go into the normal, and over the time, they get probably atrophied and they don't use it. So is it considered as a kind of, because the choroid is also involved here in case of Fuchs, but the terminology says it's heterochromic iridocyclitis. So I just wanted to know more about any relevance of these thinning of the choroids in cases of these Fuchs.
Maybe we have to have a multi-center study and proper data, how much it thins, and whether a typical Fuchs has this or atypical Fuchs has this, then we can come to a conclusion.
Now the terminology has been changed into Fuchs uveitic syndrome.
Yeah.
Includes the posterior segment manifestations as well. So where we have the disc staining, chorioretinal scars, and perivascular staining also is taken into consideration.
You're correct.
Very true.
Posterior segment manifestations are also recognized for Fuchs. The choroidal thinning again is because of the chronic inflammation happening in the vitreous and the posterior segment as well. I think more we need to look into that.
Yes, doctor.
Wonderful point.
Small question.
Yes, ask.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Ellis.
Ma'am, like normally in Fuchs uveitis, we have seen that when we give topical steroids, the IOP shoots up. So we normally treat it with no topical NSAIDs. But immediately after cataract surgery, when we give topical steroids, the spike in IOP is not seen. So what happens when we remove the cataract? Like before doing the surgery, when we give topical uveitis, there is intraocular elevation of intraocular pressure. But after cataract surgery, we don't notice this phenomena of IOP spike post topical steroids. So does the lens itself has some role in the causation or the
Possibly, because we did a study on autoantigens and we found autoantigens in Fuchs, Behçet's and leptospirosis. So maybe there is some autoantigens in the lens, and after removal of the lens, KPs also disappear in some cases. So we can look into those data. We have published also. We can look into the data and we can take a higher study, I mean bigger study.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Vaishali, some expert thoughts of yours. You disappeared totally.
Yeah, I had an emergency in between. I think about Fuchs, what I would like to say is many of these are confused with intermediate uveitis because the presence of vitreous debris is a part of the Fuchs, which I'm sure has already been highlighted. And I think it's very important to look for these features and not to unnecessarily start patients on immunosuppression. So if you're seeing stellate KPs and you're seeing vitreous inflammation, but no cystoid macular edema or not much leakage, don't start immunosuppression because it might simply be Fuchs.
So any other thoughts or shall we conclude? I think we will. It's time now.
Yeah, time now.
Thank you.
I think all of us,
Thank you.
realize that we've actually had a very wide spectrum of topics in uvea, put together a very beautiful sequence. And my very special thanks to Dr. Avinash for planning it, and so that it helped ARC outshine again. And truly very thankful to the expert panel for being right there till the end and with such wonderful discussions and really top-notch speakers. This is one of the best of uvea webinars. I'm sure it will remain in the ARC website for many more to learn in future. And of course, I would like to thank my very supportive ARC moderator, Srinivas Joshi, for being such a big strength for me. Thanks to Mr. Kripal and the AIOS team. Thanks to Sai and Manjula from Numerotech. Thanks, of course, to Dr. Anand. Thanks a lot, Dr. Anand, for always being so supportive and keeping a watch on time and keeping our webinars very efficient. And our deep felt thanks to NTOT for the phenomenal support for all our ARC activities. And finally, and most importantly, we did have a good number of viewers. And I think it's attendees who make us keep coming back to you with more and more webinars.